Good afternoon, everybody. We'll get going in just about a minute here as a few folks trickle in. All right, good afternoon, everybody. I think we've got most of our attendees in, so why don't we kick off? Hello, everybody. I'll come on camera for a second here as I get going. Hi, everybody. My name is Colin Casson. I'm the policy manager at the Invasive Species Center, and I want to thank you for joining. This is our third repeat of similar content as we just introduced the Invasive Species Action Fund for fiscal year 24-25. So we're excited to have the fund open and available, ready for submissions. We've already got a few of our first early birds having submitted. So the fund opened on March 6th, and the deadline for all application submission is April 11th. So we've got about 3 weeks or so left. And the intent of this webinar is just kind of a quick version, a bit of an overview of the applicant guidebook, just helping people understand a little bit of the context behind some of the decisions we're making on the fund and helping them understand how to best position their projects for funding this year. So the Invasive Species Action Fund is a grant program that's supporting on-the-ground management and monitoring of invasive species throughout the province of Ontario. And the project is very great. We're very grateful for funding from the province through the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry for this program. With Ontario being highest risk of any province in Canada of invasive species introduction and spread for a variety of reasons, which we don't have time to get into today here. Really, we've designed the Invasive Species Action Fund as one of the solutions towards trying to close the gap between invasive species opportunity and some of the challenges that they're posing there. And so, although we have yet to set a program budget for this fiscal year, many of these decisions are tied into broader provincial budget decisions. We do know we heard loud and clear from everybody last year that the earlier we can get going on an invasive species action fund launch, the better for everyone's benefit. And so, although we can't say what the overall pot of available funds is for this year, last year it was $500,000. We do hope that we'll be able to provide a sufficient amount of funding this year to be able to really expedite a lot of action that's being delivered all across the province by groups like you. And what we've learned for the last few years, really, of running invasive species granting programs across the province of Ontario, is that there's a lot of great work that's happening on the landscape and a lot of great work that's happening at really modest funding thresholds as well, delivering really good community-based action on these things. But really, ultimately, there's a gap between what is that. What are the solutions people are ready and willing and able to implement, and what are the funding streams that are available. There's a number of funding streams available, which many of us use. But really there hasn't been one until the Invasive Species Action Fund that's dedicated specifically to invasive species. So I'm not sure if you're in the same boat as me, but sometimes we'll have to be thinking about our projects in terms of species at risk, impact mitigation, or climate mitigation, or a number of other things. And really, I think many of us tend to think about our projects in terms of invasive species action. So what we tried to do is design a program to address that and service those needs. And last year in 2023-24, the year we're just in the last couple of weeks of here in terms of the province's fiscal, we were really excited to see some of the great projects that were submitted. This 2023-24 year was really the first year that we were able to scale up an existing previous microgrants program into a newer program we called ISAF, the Invasive Species Action Fund, which includes smaller thresholds like microgrants, but also two larger thresholds as well. One tier that had caps up to $10,000 and another that had projects being funded up to $25,000 and higher as well. So we're excited to build on some of those successes in the year past. So as we look backwards, where have we been able to get in the current fiscal year? Well, ISAF, just to give a little bit of context, last year had 110 project applications coming into the fund. Many of those were micro grants at the $2,000 threshold, but a number of those coming in at the $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 price tag as well. And ultimately, we were able to take the province's investment of about $500,000 and stretch it into 61 projects. So if you add up all those 110 applicants, how much were they looking for? About $1.1 million. And, one of the really exciting things to see from my perspective too is that people were proposing for every dollar they were requesting, they were going to deliver more than $2.1 of kind of total project value. So nice to see their cash and in-kind contributions outweighing what they were looking for in terms of support from the province via ISAF. And some of those KPIs, the key performance indicators, which really start to add up when we start to add them across a number of projects here. We looked at job creation, 130 different contracts or employment opportunities. We had a lot of volunteers and volunteer hours, 1,200 volunteers contributing almost 5,300 volunteer hours, a number of online engagements, a number of events. And really, as I say, when you start to add them all together, it starts to really tell an impressive story in terms of the work that people like you delivered last year. A couple of quick project highlights here. There's a number of great projects. Like I say, there was at least 61 projects, which we really loved to support this year. But I wanted to pull out a couple just examples because I think they really kind of speak to some of the essence of what we're trying to do. The Township of Strong, of course, municipalities are a key implementation partner on this through the fund, and many municipalities and conservation authorities were recipients last year. And so they put together a project called Say No to Japanese Knotweed in Sundridge, Strong and Jolly. So a really interesting project, biodiversity centric, focus in on removing as much Japanese knotweed as they were able. Of course, Japanese knotweed is a provincially regulated species, so a nice helpful connection point there. They were using the best management practices, the provincially identified BMPs as well. So really nice kind of well-rounded projects there that also use volunteer effort as well. So love to see it. A lot of great kind of checks in terms of a really strong proposal. Another great example I wanted to daylight quickly was the Missinaba Cree First Nation proposal. They put in a project and were funded called the Dog Lake Missinaba Invasive Species Watch. And to summarize the project quickly, really what they were trying to do there was do that one-on-one touch point contact at public boat launches in their territory, and really nice to see them just discussing clean, drain, and dry. Of course, those are new provincial regulations. So nice to see that kind of provincial policy connection point in there as well. And so they were out there talking about species like rusty crayfish, zebra mussel, and sea lamprey. So, nice opportunity for us just to make that kind of direct engagement, that direct conversation there. So, there's a few things I like about this project, but those would be just a couple quickly there. And would encourage anyone throughout the presentation, if you like, just to throw any notes or questions you have in the Q&A function you'll find on Zoom. Please feel free, and we've got some Q&A time at the end of the webinar just to chat through as specific as you're willing and interested to get on your projects if you have any questions. So as we look forward, really we've tried to create this program being iterative in every sense. And realizing that, last year, especially when we were kind of launching a brand new granting program, although, like I say, we've done it for a few years on the micro grant investment level of $2,000 or $3,000 style projects, we hadn't been able to support higher level projects of $10 or $20 or $30,000. So we've tried to, like I say, create an iterative process here. And I just wanted to highlight a number of kind of key feedback pieces that we've received throughout the last year or so, and just speak to how we've tried to integrate them into the new version of ISAF 2024-25 as we launch it. The first piece of feedback that we heard was that multi-year funding is key to sustained success on invasive species. We completely agree with this perspective. Of course, we're trying to echo and amplify this perspective as loudly as we can. I think there are some challenges with respect to multi-year budgeting. And so what I would propose as kind of a mitigation strategy, I suppose, because we're only able to make ISAF this cycle available for 1-year projects at a time. We continue to work on it for future cycles, but for the upcoming year ahead, we're only looking to support projects of 1 year at a time. what I would propose is start thinking about your projects in terms of a phased approach of a year by year. So if we could effectively buy support for you on your project of phase two of four or phase one of three, I think that's a good way to start thinking about it. And there's an inherent strength, I guess, in your project coming back to ISAF for funding in future years. When it looks like a project that is part of kind of a longer term multi-year approach, that is a really high value project. And I think it makes a stronger um, um, argument for you to be funded next year. So would encourage you to think, heard the feedback loud and clear, want you to understand that we've appreciated it and we continue to advocate for it. This year, as I say, 1 year funding projects is all we're able to do this cycle, but appreciate the feedback and would encourage people to think about their projects in a kind of a phased approach. The other piece of feedback we received last year, we were able to launch the program in May of 2023 to support projects that happened last summer, effectively the end of May. It was a really tight and quick turnaround and appreciate your patience in that. And the piece of feedback we've got from some of our listening sessions throughout is the earlier you can go, the better. Even if there are some uncertainty points around the program and what is the overall investment project, the piece of feedback we got was we need more time to plan and prepare and deliver the best value projects. So as a bit of a response to that, what we've tried to do is launch earlier in March of this year. So as I said before, we launched this ISAF call for proposals on March 6th this year, and we're able to close it a bit earlier, of course, than we did last year on April 11th. One of the things I think our team is really proud about is we're able to turn around from the closing deadline last year to notification letters for the successful projects. I think it was 8-day turnaround, which was really breakneck speed. So a lot of people pull in late nights, but basically, the thing I want to convey is we're hoping to keep that same spirit of very, very fast turnaround because we totally appreciate the perspective that the earlier people can get notifications of successful receipt of funding, even if it is just an authorization letter, the quicker they can deliver better built projects. So this is a step in that direction. Would love to see us be able to continue to move it up in the calendar next year. But we were able to launch this year, March 6th. So we're right about halfway through the application process right now. So I, appreciate that piece of feedback that was given frequently. And really, I think one of the other key things that people liked about the project and want to maintain going forward was there's a delicate balance, striking the right balance between the amount of time people need to put into managing and administering the grant and reporting process itself, and also doing the work. From my perspective, of course, we're managing provincial funds here, so we do have to make sure that there's the right checks and balances in play. And I hope that we've struck the right balance in making sure that it's as easy as reasonably possible for people to manage their funds and ultimately spend as much of their time as reasonably possible on doing the work. So hope that we've struck that balance. But again, on any of these three or anything else, we are always welcome to additional feedback too, if you think that we can improve the program moving forward. So for ISAF 24-25, we're happy to be able to launch, as we did last year, 3 separate funding streams. There's a microgrant category. We've boosted up the cap on this. Last year it was $2,000. This year we've gone up to $2,500 for a microgrant cap. Accelerated impact stream, it's coming back at the same amount, funding projects up to $10,000. And transformative action, funding projects that are up to $25,000. And we've also put the caveat there that there are some exceptional projects that are coming in that are able to kind of exceed that 25 cap and go up to as high as $50,000. Now, if you're interested in kind of understanding, do you think that your project meets that kind of exceptional projects barrier? I would encourage you to reach out to Kendra, who's our grant administrator, and have that conversation with her, explain your project in a little bit more detail, and she can give you some good guidance on does she think it connects into that kind of exceptional circumstance scenario. We'll speak to the priority species in just a moment here for each of the thresholds, but just high level quickly, I just wanted to note microgrants is really about any species that is invasive per the community's definition of it. So that would include a wide range of species from periwinkles to garlic mustard, buckthorns, those that are very stewardship friendly, absolutely classify and qualify into this microgrant stream. And for accelerated impact and transformative action, what we're trying to do here is be a little bit more targeted to species that are regulated by the province and just cumulatively show impact on those the tighter list of species. So if a species, for instance, is regulated under the Ontario Invasive Species Act, that would be an example of a species that's eligible under one of these two higher streams, accelerated impact or transformative action. If there's a species that's a local priority, but not maybe a provincial priority because it's not regulated under the ISA, like a garlic mustard, for instance, would encourage you to think about scoping your project to the microgrants threshold. And again, would encourage people to keep using that Q&A function. We'll get to those questions in a moment. We've got some other new information this year. So for a few reasons, one, mostly just to turn this around as quickly as humanly possible from submission timeline to notification timeline, and also to make reporting a little bit cleaner and easier for everybody. We made a small investment in some new software, and ultimately that software is going to help us work with recipients better, manage their projects a little bit quicker, give those notifications a little bit quicker, respecting the fact that time is of the essence on these projects. And so it's a software package called Good Grants. And so this is kind of a screen cap of what it looks like. We've had a number of projects already submitted, as I said earlier, so would encourage you to check it out. It's pretty quick, honestly. If I can do it, I think anybody can do it. But here's how you register for an account here. If you go to invasivespeciescenter.ca/grants, there's a quick link into this. So you can complete a registration. All you need is an email address and your name. Just verify yourself with some security verification quickly, and away you go. And so we're going to be using this same software package for a couple of granting programs we're happy to be launching. This is one, the Invasive Species Action Fund. Another, we'll be talking about Phragmites. We'll have some more information available soon. And so what you do is start an application, just click start an application, and away you go. And one of the first questions that's going to pop up is there's a Start Here tab, and then as you go through completing the questions here, you'll be able to move on and progress. And so the first question we're looking for is some information on what is here the grant category that you're looking for, accelerated impact, microgrants, or transformative action. So again, it's just kind of what is your thinking on scope. So microgrants, if it's a $2,000 or $2,500 rather cap, accelerated impact if it's a $10,000 capped project, or $25,000 to $50,000 for transformative action. And so once you've done that, you can proceed to the next. Now, one other thing I'd like to note here is within this first Start Here tab, you'll see ISAF Applicant Guide. I would strongly encourage you to download that. That has all the tips and tricks and funding requirements and kind of stipulations. I'd recommend you downloading that PDF and just keeping it open as you go. Basically, this webinar is an attempt to kind of summarize the quickest, most high-level key points of that. But this document here, it's not too onerous of a read. It's a pretty quick flip, but it contains all that critical information in terms of what are eligible expenses and how do I complete this application to best connect into the fund priorities. There's two other things here which are available for optional download if you'd like. There's a Word version of the microgrants template, and there's a Word version of the accelerated impact and transformative action streams. Now, this software package is the only way that we're accepting grant applications. All those questions have been copy and pasted over into Word documents for the two streams. The questions are a little bit different, of course, if you're looking for a smaller amount of money or a larger amount. And so what we wanted to do is respect the fact that I'm sure that many groups are going to be collaborating with external organizations and maybe editing and kind of, in a cloud, a real-time way. And so we wanted to give you the Word doc and not have everybody go and copy and paste all the questions, put it into a Word file, and then share. So again, feel free to download either of these two Word documents, depending on what stream you're going for. Throw it on the cloud if you'd like, if that's how your organization operates, and then you can share externally. And then the idea being is that you could then copy and paste those answers into the Good Grants portal here when you're ready to submit, because we're really only able to have one. You can log in and save as you go on Good Grants, but only one person can do that, right? If I created the account in my name, I couldn't give it to my colleague Lauren here to be able to go and edit and revise some of those. So hence why we provide the Word docs. And so there's three questions which are really just us checking in and making sure that before you go to the hassle of putting together the whole application, we just want to make sure that you're eligible, your project is eligible to respect your time and our reviewers as well. And so a few quick questions. The first being, what stream of funding are you looking for? The second important question here being, does your organization fall into one of these eligible recipient categories? Are you an NGO? Are you a university college, a municipality, or local government? Are you an indigenous community or an organization, or are you a conservation authority? If so, click yes, and you're eligible. If no, you'll get flagged. And does your project involve invasive Phragmites? Can't articulate this strongly enough. This project, the Invasive Species Action Fund does not support Phragmites project. Why? Not because we don't love to see frag action, but because we're going to have frag specific funding program called the Invasive Phragmites Control Fund, and we're going to have more information on that in about a month's time. So hence why we said, does your project involve Phragmites? Hopefully you're saying no, and that will make you eligible. So once you've answered those questions, including the one on the previous page, you're going to click check eligibility, and away you go. And if you're not eligible, it'll give you a kickback notification, and it'll just kind of say, for one reason or another, you're not eligible. So consider submitting a new application that's addressing those concerns in a different way. In terms of eligible projects, what ISAF is designed to support are control and management on the ground projects, mapping and monitoring projects, those happening in the province of Ontario, and other projects that are planning and creating management plans or control plans for invasive species in Ontario. ISAF is not able to support projects that are either research focused, outreach, education, projects that are happening on private lands. I would note though, sometimes we see good projects that are deemed eligible that are partially happening on private land, but partially happening on public land. So to give you an example, a municipality and private landowner are neighbors, and periwinkle, garden invasive, occurs on both properties. And there's a volunteer group, the Friends of the Municipal Park, want to do some work, and they're saying, well, we're not going to do all that hard work if we're not going to be able to address the root source, which is the private lands, and the private landowners on board. That would be a great microgrant project. So that would be an example of a project that is eligible. An example of a private lands project that is ineligible or not eligible might be a project where, let's say, there's buckthorn and removal that's happening exclusively on private property, not adjacent to public lands, and it's done by a private contractor, let's say, of the individual private property owner, and they wanted to apply to a microgrant of $2,500 to pay the contractor. That's not an eligible project. There are other funding streams that are able to support that, but really it's a limited pot that we have available, so we have to allocate those funds as best we can to public spaces. And again, ISAF does not support Phragmites focused projects. Sometimes we do get the question, well, what happens if my project is focused on the ground outcomes and impacts? And there's also a research element to it as well. I would say that's totally fine. That is an eligible project. I think it's about how you're positioning and thinking about your project more than anything. Of course, all good projects are going to have little bits and pieces of community outreach and maybe some education building as well. So, or even some research too, where we're learning from our project implementation and modifying future outcomes and approaches. So I would say just because it has a little thread of research or outreach and education doesn't make it ineligible, but just make sure that you're thinking about your project, framing your project and presenting your project to our reviewers as a project that's focused on the on-the-ground outcomes and impact-focused outcomes as the primary thing that ISAF dollars are supporting. These are the priority species and priority key themes for this year. As I said before, microgrants up to $2,500. Those are a wide array of any invasive species. And so those are not species that are, for instance, provincially regulated or anything like that. So you might think a garlic mustard or a buckthorn, that would fall into those. This table here is really for action, transformative action and accelerated impact. So those are those two higher thresholds, the $10,000 and the $25,000 and above $1,000 funding caps. And so we've provided some priority species. And really the reason why we need to provide priority species, of course, is because there's a lot of invasive species out there, and irrespective of how much funding we're able to obtain for the program, ultimately, of course, we're going to be resource limited. And so we're trying to provide the best value and the best bang for buck and impact we can. So we have to tighten that list of what are eligible species. And so we work in collaboration with our funding partner at MNRF to determine what are the highest priority species. So if you're thinking about terrestrial plants, what are the eligible species for stream 2 and 3? Well, Ontario Invasive Species Act regulated species are our starting point. So we're looking at knotweeds, dog strangling vines, especially in these regions, but not exclusively. Tree of heaven as well. Giant hogweed and wild parsnip are also on there, especially where there's plans in place for multi-year plans or beyond one property level owner plans in place. Those would be really strong proposals. In terms of aquatic invasive species, again, Ontario Invasive Species Act regulated species such as, but also including others, invasive crayfish, excluding rusty, water soldier, European water chestnut, Carolina fanwort, yellow floating heart, flowering rush. Also looking to the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence governors and premiers least wanted list. There's a lot of overlap with the ISA species, but those are also eligible species as well. And zebra and quagga mussels where they're in new areas or they're right on the leading edge of expansion. Forest pests, they're listed here as well. Again, trying to do when we're providing geographic specificity here is just indicate the highest risk locations. So, for instance, in very far away from the most current and closest detection of oak wilt would be, let's say, like in, I'm not sure, Kenora or Thunder Bay, very far away, relatively speaking, to where oak wilt is currently known to be. We would not look at those as highly favorable projects because they're really prevention focused and we need to be focused in on the leading edge. So if you did have an oak wilt project in Niagara region, of course, Niagara Falls is an oak wilt hotspot, Central Ontario, Windsor, Sarnia, Sault Ste. Marie, those are also closer proximity, hence that's why we specify them. So those are them. And then in terms of the key themes, we provide these more than anything just as philosophically important ideas that we like to connect to. So you don't need to check every box by any means, but if you check one priority species and a key theme or a couple of key themes, that's when you have a very well-rounded, thoughtful project. We have a budget webinar coming up on March 20th, so I'd encourage anybody who's interested in a little bit more information on budget development to attend that webinar. But here in this, this is kind of just a copy and paste of a sample budget here. So you're seeing different in the rows here, different categories on the left side here, equipment rental, communications, administration, salaries, and HR. And then you're seeing the proponent contributions. Really what we're looking for here this year is a one-to-one match or greater from ISAF proponents. And it doesn't need to be cash. It can be in kind and cash combined. So a lot of those projects just that we saw last year we're doing a good job at valuing all the contributions they were making in terms of volunteer time or existing equipment that was maybe covered by another funder, or maybe there's some cash that another funder is bringing. If you add those all together and they equal what you're looking for from ISAF, that's an eligible project. So I would encourage you to check out that webinar in a couple days from now to learn a little bit more about how we fill out we advise filling out a budget in greater detail. Some quick frequently asked questions here. Who is an eligible applicant? I listed them before, but any non-governmental organization or charity, municipality or local governments, universities, colleges, and other schools, Indigenous communities and organizations, and conservation authorities are all eligible proponents. Ineligible applicants would be federal governments and departments and agencies, provincial government ministries, organizations or entities that are outside of Ontario, and private landowners working on private lands. Can multiple applications be submitted from one organization for different projects? Absolutely. This year we are encouraging, especially because there's some organizations that work all across the province managing multiple sites from conservation authorities to conservancies and other similar groups too. So if you have multiple projects you'd like to submit for funding under ISAF, we'd encourage you to do that. Would encourage everybody to submit their best projects they possibly can and not go too far down the laundry list. But if you have multiple projects you want to submit, we would encourage you to do so. What if my species of interest is not listed as a priority? The microgrant stream casts a very wide net, and virtually any invasive species would qualify under there. If you don't see your species listed under the second or third stream, unfortunately, it is ineligible then for those two funding streams. Are letters of support required? No, they're not formally required, but we do encourage you to think about how can your project work with as many external partners as possible. And so we ask that you quantify their contributions in the budget table as well. Is there a stacking limit or a matching requirement? Yes, this year we are instituting a required minimum of 1-to-1 stacking. And so your contributions could be 50 cents worth of volunteer time and 50 cents worth of cash from another funder. And you're looking for $1 of invasive species action fund funding. Under that circumstance, you'd meet the $1 to $1 or 1-to-1 matching ratio. So that would be an eligible project. And if you're interested in how do we quantify our in-kind contributions, it was one that we got a lot of questions on last year. And what is a reasonable in-kind and what are some of the definitions you use? We'd encourage you to check out this other webinar that will be recorded and posted on March 22nd. It's going to be at 11:30 until noon, and you can register for that the same place you registered for this on the ISE website. So the good thing about this year is you're able to save your applications as you go. So you can log into Good Grants, create an account, and then go ahead and save your application and come back to it. So would recommend you getting in there as early as you can, starting your application and checking in frequently to it. It's nice that it saves work. We do, as I said before, have an application guide that you can download once you create a new application. You can download that PDF. So that's a helpful piece as well. And if you want to apply, just go to invasivespeciescenter.ca/grants. And just to reiterate, the closing deadline, which we don't have the ability to extend, is Thursday, April 11th at a minute before midnight Eastern. So strongly encourage you. Unfortunately, we're not able to accept late applications. So Thursday, April 11th is the hard deadline for this in the evening, just before midnight. So I would encourage you to check that out. And with that in mind, I just wanted to put up Kendra's contact information there, kjolly@invasivespeciescenter.ca. Would encourage you to check to send her a note if you want to set up a one-on-one conversation, or send her an email just to confirm eligibility or answer any kind of smaller questions that you want to get into. I would encourage you to check in with Kendra at your earliest availability. So with that in mind, I think we've got a few questions in there. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to throw them in the Q&A. In the last couple minutes we've got here, Lauren will help me field a couple of these questions. So let me know when you've got a couple, of Lauren.
I have some ready to go. No rest for the wicked, Colin. The first question talks about priority geographies. They're noting that priority geographies were removed from the application guideline as they were last year, or different from they were last year. Hoping you can speak to a little bit about priority geographies this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a oak wilt in the moraine, right? So yeah, we do note there. So we specify in the application guideline here in this table. So this is copy and paste right from the guideline. So oak wilt in highest risk regions, so Niagara region, central Ontario. So I think that would connect in with the Oak Ridges moraine nicely. Windsor, Sarnia, and Sault Ste. Marie. Like I said before, I think the motivation behind trying to add these regions specifically is not to exclude necessarily projects happening from other parts of the province. These are examples, but they are not exclusive regions. So if you did have a project, I think the Oak Ridge Moraine would connect into that central. But if you did have a project that, let's say, is a little bit farther afield, I would encourage you still to submit. But really what we try and do by putting this in is just, take limited resources and allocate them to the best places we possibly can to achieve immediate impact. So would encourage you, even if you don't think that, I think that the Oak Ridge Moraine connects in nicely to Central. So would encourage you to submit it. But even if there's anybody else on the call maybe that is thinking, oh, I'm Ottawa, and we're a little bit farther afield, but I still really want to get this project up and going, and it's not a huge ask in terms of financial resources, I still think it's probably worth putting in, because this is not an exclusive listing of geographic regions.
And I'm assuming that if folks do have questions specific to their project, they could reach out to Kendra in the meantime and ask about those.
Perfect. Yeah.
The next question here, I actually might be able to help a little bit. Are there descriptions of past projects available for viewing? And I can start off by saying on our website, we have all of the past um, projects available or recipients available. So you can find more information there. And then we are recording this webinar. So the examples that Colin talked about in the beginning will be available to rewatch at your convenience. Colin, over to you.
You got it. I would do a quick plug too for the Invasive Species Center's annual forum, which had a recipient celebration stifle. So those recordings are available on our website. So if you want to get a feel for what other proponents were successful in submitting, last year we kind of had quick 8 to 10 minute summary presentations of a number of projects as well. So that would be a slightly deeper dive than the list that Lauren suggests there.
Yes, that was my project, so I probably should have done a better job at remembering it. So thanks, Colin. Um, Next question here. If we received funding from ISAF last year and wish to apply for the same project again, could we get ISC feedback on the documents that we submitted to ensure they were acceptable? I'm guessing that this means the documents submitting at reporting time. But if this person wants to clarify, happy to see that too.
Yeah, I always good to suggest contacting someone else. If you send an email to Kendra, she can set you up with one-on-one. Maybe the other way to interpret that question is feedback on the application from last year, I'm guessing maybe. And if that's the case, either way, Kendra would have those notes to file. So she is your resource there. And it's K Jolly, Jolley at invasivespeciescenter.ca.
Thank you. Last question I have in here right now. So if other folks do have questions, please just enter them into the Q&A box and I will read them out. This one says, what is considered an NGO? For example, what about a cottage owners association, which I am a representative of?
Richard, if it's a registered incorporated entity, that's easy. Really, like if the entity has a bank account, then it's easy. If it's not, if it's, for instance, we've got some questions last year from like friends of or not incorporated entities that function as, coordinated units, but they don't have annual financials, they don't have a bank account, they're not incorporated. Would suggest if that's the case for you, that you connect in with another organization that could be a partner on the proposal and submit it on their behalf and accept the funds and disperse the funds. That's how we've seen some people kind of do a little bit of a workaround is do a partnered project. But if you're a incorporated entity as your cottage association, I think would be, then I think you're fair game and it's a pretty easy way to apply. So you don't, just to be clear too, you don't need to be a registered charity to be a non-governmental organization. You could be not a registered charity, but just a regular old-fashioned not-for-profit, and both would be eligible there.
Thank you. I put the link to the forum recording that Colin was mentioning at the beginning, so folks can check that out for a deep dive on a few of the successful projects last year. I don't see any more questions there, but if anyone has any last minute ones and you're thinking of them, please type them out. I guess in that meantime, I can also plug the other two webinars that Colin was talking about. So there's the Developing a Budget deep dive info session coming up next Wednesday, March 20th at 10 a.m. Also, the in-kind contribution webinar, which is next Friday at 11:30 a.m. Or is it this Friday? My weeks are
It
all
is this
mixed up.
Friday.
It's
Yeah, two
this
days from now.
Wednesday.
Yeah.
This Wednesday is developing a budget, and this Friday is in-kind contribution. You can tell we work on the fiscal year end because the weeks just don't stay straight. So yeah, I don't see any more questions here. Kendra's information is up on the screen for any that may come to you later. But otherwise, if you're good, Colin, I would say we're good.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much, Lauren. And remember, everybody, April 11th is the deadline for submissions. So happy writing. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you.